The envelope hits the floor, and my knees almost buckle. It's thin, too thin for anything good to come out of it. My hands shake as I pick it up, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. The paper feels heavier than it should, like it's carrying all the weight of 3 years of silence. "Pay us or leave," it says. Just 4 words, scrawled in handwriting I know too well. My throat tightens, tears blur the page. How dare they, after everything? I'm standing outside their bakery, the place where I learned how to knead dough, frost cakes, and dream bigger than this small town of Maplewood. But now, it feels foreign, unwelcoming. Memories crash over me like waves. Mom teaching me to swirl frosting just right. Dad patting my shoulder after a long day's work. And then, nothing. 3 years of nothing because I chose love over fear, Rachel over judgment. But here we are again. Their bakery smells faintly of burnt sugar tonight, a bitter reminder of what once was sweet. I can't unsee the cracks on the walls, or the faded sign above the door that used to gleam proudly. Is this really about rent money? Or is this guilt packaged neatly in an envelope? If you've ever felt torn between who you are and who others want you to be, you'll understand why this moment guts me. Stay with me. Subscribe now to hear how far one choice can take you when forgiveness feels impossible, but hope still lingers. This isn't just my story. It might be yours too. Let me tell you about us. Because if you're going to understand this mess, you need to know who's in it. I'm Claire, and for most of my life, I was the dutiful daughter. Reliable, steady, always willing to roll up my sleeves and help out at the family bakery. People used to say I had flour in my veins instead of blood. But that was before everything changed. Before I realized being true to myself meant losing the people who raised me. Mom is complicated. She's the kind of woman who can frost a wedding cake with one hand while juggling an order ticket in the other. Hardworking, yes, but also unbending, like steel wrapped in sugar. Her love has always come with conditions. Be perfect, make us proud, don't embarrass us. Dad? He's quieter, more reserved, but his silence carries its own weight. Growing up, he was the one who taught me how to hold steady when things got tough. Keep your hands firm on the dough, he'd say, like it was some universal life lesson. Maybe it was, for him anyway. Then there's Rachel. Oh, Rachel. Where do I even start? She's the opposite of everything Maplewood expects. Bold where they're cautious, unapologetic where they're careful. When we met, she didn't care that I came from a small-town bakery, or that my parents thought their rules would keep me tethered forever. She saw me, the real me, and loved me anyway. For the first time in my life, I felt free. But freedom came at a cost. The day I introduced Rachel to them, something broke between us. A crack so deep no amount of frosting could smooth it over. And now, years later, here we are again. Their motivations? Survival, maybe. Pride, definitely. They've never been good at admitting they were wrong, let alone asking for help. Me? I want answers, closure, maybe even forgiveness, but not just theirs. Mine, too. Because carrying anger around feels like lugging sacks of flour through snow. Eventually, it wears you down. Rachel, though, she's the anchor keeping me grounded. While I wrestle with guilt and resentment, she reminds me why I walked away in the first place. You deserve better, she says, over and over, her voice soft but firm. And yet, she's here, standing beside me as I face the wreckage of my past. That's who she is. Someone who believes in second chances, even when they feel impossible. This story isn't just mine, it's ours. A tangled web of love, loss, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, some bridges aren't burned beyond repair. If you've ever wondered what happens when loyalty collides with identity, stick with me. This journey isn't easy, but it's real. And it might just remind you of your own struggles to find balance between who you are and who others expect you to be. Maplewood smells like home, even now, like cinnamon and burnt sugar clinging to the air, stubborn as old memories. The bakery sits on Main Street, its faded sign swaying slightly in the breeze. It's seen better days. The paint is chipped, the windows streaked with grime, but it still hums with life. Or at least it did once. Tonight, though, it feels different. Quieter, like the building itself knows something isn't right. The streetlights cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk, their glow flickering faintly against the cool October wind. Leaves skitter past me, dry and brittle, crunching underfoot like whispers of the past I can't escape. Above me, the sky is heavy with clouds, pressing down like they're trying to smother whatever light is left. The air smells sharp, metallic, almost like rain might break any second. Or maybe that's just my nerves playing tricks on me. Inside the bakery, it's worse. The familiar creak of the door sends a shiver up my spine. Flour dust still clings to every surface, ghosting the counters where Mom used to knead dough before sunrise. The ovens sit silent now, their metal surfaces dulled by time and neglect. A faint tang of sourdough lingers, mixing uneasily with the sharper scent of cleaning chemicals, like they've been scrubbing away more than just dirt. I run my fingers along the edge of the counter, feeling the grooves worn smooth by years of work. My palm comes away dusty, and for a moment, I'm 12 again, standing here while Mom shows me how to pipe frosting into perfect swirls. "Steady hands," she'd say, her voice firm but patient. But tonight, there's no patience in the air, just tension thick enough to choke on. Outside, the town feels smaller than I remember, closed in by rows of brick buildings and empty storefronts. The diner across the street has its lights off, curtains drawn tight. Even the park down the block looks abandoned, swings swaying gently in the wind like forgotten promises. Everything about this place tugs at me, the sights, the smells, the echoes of laughter that aren't there anymore. It's funny how places hold on to things longer than people do. This bakery wasn't just a business. It was our heartbeat, the center of everything we were. Now, it feels hollow, like the soul's been ripped out of it. And standing here, breathing in the ghosts of what used to be, I wonder if coming back was a mistake, or if it's exactly where I'm supposed to be. If you've ever felt torn between who you are and where you come from, stay with me. This story will take you through the cracks and the crumbs, and show you how some things can still taste sweet, even after they've broken apart. You want to know what's eating at me? It's not just the envelope, that stupid piece of paper, with its 4 ugly words, or even the fact that they had the nerve to send it after 3 years of silence. No, it's bigger than that. It's this gnawing ache in my chest, this constant tug of war between who I am and who they wanted me to be. And I don't know how to untangle it because every time I try, all I see is their faces, the disappointment, the judgment, the way Dad turned his back when I told them about Rachel like I'd slapped him across the face or something worse. Here's the thing. Loving Rachel wasn't supposed to cost me everything. I mean, isn't love supposed to make your life fuller, brighter? That's what she did for me. She made me feel alive in a way I never thought possible, like I could breathe for the first time without someone telling me how deep each breath should go. But here's the kicker. Choosing her meant losing them. And now, standing outside this bakery where I spent half my childhood learning how to measure flour and pipe frosting into perfect little swirls, I can't help but wonder if I made the right call. Was it worth it? Am I worth it? Because let's be real. They didn't just disown me. They erased me. 3 years ago, I stopped being their daughter and became this stranger who showed up on holidays only to get cold shoulders and awkward silences. They acted like I betrayed them, like falling in love with Rachel was some kind of personal attack instead of just me living my truth. So yeah, When that envelope landed in my hands, part of me wanted to tear it up, throw it away, pretend it never happened. But another part, the part that still remembers Mom teaching me how to frost cakes, or Dad patting me on the shoulder after a long day's work, that part couldn't let it go. Because maybe this isn't really about rent money. Maybe it's about closure, or forgiveness, or something else I'm too scared to name. And then there's Rachel. She's been my rock through all of this, always reminding me why I walked away in the first place. You deserve better, she says over and over, like a mantra. And God, I want to believe her. I do. But sometimes late at night, when the world feels quiet and heavy, I lie awake, wondering if she's right. Do I deserve better? Or am I just running from the people who shaped me, good and bad, because facing them feels impossible? The worst part? Now they're asking for help. Not an apology, not even an acknowledgement of what they did. Just cash, like we're business partners instead of family. And here I am, stuck between guilt and resentment, torn between helping them rebuild what's left of the bakery and protecting myself from getting hurt again. How do you choose between the people who raised you and the person you've become? What happens when doing the right thing means sacrificing your own peace? I keep thinking about what Rachel said earlier today. They don't get to decide your value. Simple words, but they hit hard. Except, do they? If I walk away now, am I proving them right? Proving that I'm selfish, ungrateful, broken beyond repair? Or am I finally taking control of my life, setting boundaries that protect the love I fought so hard to build? If you were me, what would you do? Would you open the door and step inside, hoping against hope that things might change? Or would you turn around and walk away, knowing full well that some wounds run too deep to heal? This isn't just my story. It's yours too, in a way. We've all been here before, standing at the crossroads of loyalty and identity, trying to figure out which path leads home. So stick with me. Follow along as I wrestle with these questions, these doubts, these fears that won't quit, no matter how many times I tell myself I'm done being afraid. This journey isn't easy, but it's real. And maybe, just maybe, it'll remind you of your own battles to find balance between staying true to yourself and honoring where you came from. Calling them felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there's water below. I didn't sleep the night before. I just stared at the envelope, my fingers tracing the edges like it might bite me if I touched it wrong. When morning came, I finally picked up the phone with shaking hands, dialing the number I hadn't called in years. Each ring felt louder than the last, echoing in my ears like some kind of countdown to disaster. And then, Mom answered. Her voice hit me like a punch to the gut, older, thinner, frayed around the edges. "Claire?" she said. And for half a second I thought maybe this would be okay. Maybe she'd softened over the years. Maybe they both had. But no, because her tone shifted almost instantly, sharp and clipped, like I was an inconvenience she hadn't planned for. "What do you want?" she asked, not even pretending to sound happy to hear from me. Like 3 years of silence could just vanish into thin air because now they needed something from me. I tried to keep my voice steady as I brought up the letter, but it cracked anyway. "Why did you send this?" I asked, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. She didn't answer right away, and the pause stretched out long enough to make my stomach twist. Finally, she sighed. Heavy, world-weary sound, and said, "We need help, that's all." Just like that. No explanation, no apology, nothing. As if losing their daughter was just some minor hiccup we could move past now that the bills were piling up. And then Dad got on the line. Or rather, Mom handed him the phone, judging by the muffled shuffle in the background. His voice was rougher than I remembered, gravelly and distant, like he was speaking through layers of static. "You owe us," he said flatly, like those 3 words explained everything. Owe them. For what? For being born? For staying silent while they acted like strangers when I needed them most? The anger bubbled up inside me so fast it made my vision blur. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but instead, I forced myself to stay calm. I don't owe you anything, I shot back, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. Then I hung up before either of them could respond. But here's the thing. Hanging up didn't fix anything. If anything, it made it worse, because now I couldn't stop thinking about what they'd said. About the bakery, about money, about how desperate they must be to reach out after all this time. Guilt gnawed at me like a hungry animal, relentless and sharp-toothed. What if they really were drowning? What if ignoring them meant letting go of any chance I had to fix things between us? Or maybe that's exactly what they deserved, to sink under the weight of their own pride and bad decisions. Either way, I couldn't shake the image of that bakery, the one place that used to feel like home, crumbling apart brick by brick. Rachel found me later that night, curled up on the couch staring at the wall like it held all the answers. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. After a while, she murmured, "You okay?" And I laughed bitterly, though it wasn't funny. "No," I admitted, leaning into her warmth. "I'm not." The next day I went back to work teaching 5th graders, trying to distract myself by focusing on lesson plans and multiplication tables. But every time I looked at the clock, my mind drifted back to Maplewood, to the bakery, to the call, to the impossible choice sitting heavy in my chest. By lunchtime, I gave up pretending I could concentrate and ducked into the teacher's lounge, pulling out my phone to stare at the contact info I'd pulled up earlier. Their number glared back at me, accusing, demanding. I tapped the screen, absently, scrolling through old photos Rachel took during happier times. Pictures of us laughing together, holding hands, building a life far away from small-town judgment. Seeing those images should have made me feel better, but instead, they only reminded me of how much I stood to lose if I let them drag me back into their mess. That evening, Rachel caught me pacing the living room, muttering to myself like some kind of madwoman. "You're going to wear a hole in the carpet," she joked lightly, but her eyes softened when she saw the look on my face. "Talk to me," she urged gently, sitting down on the couch and patting the spot beside her. So I did. I spilled everything, from the letter to the phone call, to the guilt eating me alive. She listened quietly, nodding occasionally, until I ran out of words. Then she took my hand and squeezed it tight. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said firmly. "But whatever you choose, I'll stand by you." It was supposed to comfort me. And part of it did. But another part just made me feel guilty all over again. How could I ask her to support me when I wasn't even sure who I was supporting anymore? Was I fighting for them, for me, or just for some twisted idea of closure that might never come? By the end of the week, I caved. I called them back, agreeing to meet. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. Every step toward reconciliation felt like walking barefoot over broken glass, painful and messy, but I told myself it was worth it. At least, that's what I hoped. Because deep down, I knew the hardest part wasn't deciding to show up. It was figuring out whether showing up would change anything at all. If you've ever faced a decision that felt impossible to make, you know how paralyzing it can be. Would you risk reopening old wounds for the slimmest chance of healing? Or would you walk away, protecting yourself even if it meant leaving someone else behind? This isn't just my story, it's yours too. Stick with me, because the choices get harder before they get easier, and trust me, you won't see the next twist coming. The day I walked back into the bakery, I half expected it to crumble around me like one of Mom's overbaked loaves, but instead, it was almost normal. Too normal. Dad stood behind the counter, wiping down surfaces with a rag that looked older than I was, while Mom busied herself arranging trays of half-finished pastries on the shelves. For a moment, it felt like stepping into a time capsule, like the last 3 years had never happened, and we were still this tight-knit family unit, working side by side. Except we weren't. The air between us wasn't warm or welcoming. It was brittle, fragile, like glass ready to shatter at the slightest touch. Mom glanced up when I came in, her lips pressing thin before she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're here," she said, as if she'd been expecting anyone else. Then she gestured vaguely toward the table in the corner. "Sit." It wasn't an invitation. It was an order, delivered with the same clipped tone she used when telling me how to frost cakes perfectly round. I hesitated for a second, glancing at Dad, but he avoided my gaze entirely, focusing intently on scrubbing an already spotless countertop. So I sat, clutching my jacket sleeves like they might protect me from whatever storm was brewing beneath their calm exteriors. For the next hour, we talked. Or rather, they talked. Mom laid out the details: overdue rent payments, rising property, taxes, equipment repairs that cost more than they could afford. Her voice stayed steady, matter of fact, but there was something off about it, like she was reciting lines from a script instead of sharing real pain. Every now and then, Dad would grunt in agreement or shuffle papers around, avoiding eye contact like his life depended on it. They didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge the elephant in the room, that I hadn't set foot in this place since they cut me out of their lives. But they didn't have to. Their neediness said enough. By the end of the conversation, I found myself nodding along, agreeing to help. Not because I trusted them, but because part of me wanted to believe this could fix things. Maybe not everything, but something. Anything. When I left, Mom even managed a small smile, though it faltered halfway through. "Thank you," she murmured, almost reluctantly, like the words physically hurt to say. Dad nodded stiffly, his jaw tight, and muttered, "We'll figure it out." And just like that, I let myself believe, for a little while anyway, that maybe we really could. But here's the thing about hope. It's sneaky. It creeps in when you least expect it, planting seeds of possibility where none should exist. On the drive home, I caught myself imagining what it might feel like to rebuild, not just the bakery, but our relationship. To hear Mom laugh again without bitterness lurking underneath, to see Dad pat my shoulder like he used to. Rachel noticed the change in me immediately. "You seem lighter," she observed later that night, brushing a strand of hair off my forehead. "Does that mean you're okay with all this?" I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but inside I couldn't stop replaying the meeting in my head. Something about it felt off. Not wrong, exactly, but incomplete. Like they'd given me just enough rope to hang myself with. Why hadn't they apologized? Why hadn't they mentioned Rachel once? Not even to ask about her, let alone acknowledge her existence. Was it really possible to move forward without addressing the past? Or were they using my guilt to manipulate me into staying silent? That question nagged at me all week, gnawing away at the fragile sense of peace I'd built up after the meeting. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was overthinking things. After all, they'd asked for help, and I'd agreed to give it. What more did I want from them? Closure? Forgiveness? A miracle? But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself everything was fine, the doubts kept creeping back in, whispering, insidious little warnings I couldn't ignore. Then there was the neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, who stopped me outside the bakery a few days later. She leaned in close, lowering her voice like she was sharing state secrets. "They're struggling more than they let on," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the building. "Pride won't let them admit it, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head sadly before walking away. Pride. That word again. Suddenly, Everything clicked into place. Their evasiveness, their refusal to meet my gaze, their careful avoidance of anything remotely personal. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they had no one else. And yet, despite knowing that, I couldn't shake the hope that maybe, just maybe, helping them could lead to something bigger. Could it? Or was I setting myself up for another fall? If you've ever clung to a sliver of optimism in the face of overwhelming odds, you know how dangerous it can be. Because sometimes, hope isn't a lifeline, it's a trap. And I couldn't help wondering, was I walking straight into one? Stick with me, because this story is far from over. The cracks are starting to show, and soon, they'll run deeper than I ever imagined. It started with a single sentence, sharp and cutting like a knife. Your girlfriend shouldn't come next time. Mom said it casually, as if she were commenting on the weather or asking me to pass the sugar. But those 7 words landed like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me so hard I couldn't respond right away. We were in the middle of what had almost felt like progress. Me agreeing to help with the finances, them pretending to act grateful. And then that. Just like that, any illusion of normalcy shattered. I stared at her, my mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Did she really just say that? In front of Rachel, no less, who'd insisted on coming along this time because you shouldn't have to face them alone. She stood beside me now, frozen but composed, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Her touch was supposed to ground me, remind me I wasn't fighting this battle solo, but instead it made me feel raw, exposed, like they'd somehow managed to drive a wedge between us without even trying. Mom didn't blink, didn't flinch. She kept arranging pastries on the counter like nothing had happened, her movements precise and deliberate. Dad hovered nearby, silent as always, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor. Neither of them acknowledged, the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the old refrigerator in the corner, steady and unrelenting. Rachel broke the silence first, her voice calm, but firm. "Why not?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, like she genuinely wanted an explanation. And maybe she did. I don't know. All I knew was that hearing her speak sent a jolt through me, equal parts pride and panic. Pride because she wasn't backing down, wasn't letting them erase her existence again. Panic because I could already see where this was headed. The same dead-end road we'd been traveling for years. Mom finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "This is family business," she said flatly, as if those 3 words explained everything. Family business. As if Rachel weren't part of my family, as if loving her didn't define who I am. The hypocrisy hit me like a freight train, leaving me dizzy and furious all at once. How dare they? After everything, after demanding my help, after acting like they deserved anything from me, they still refused to accept the most important person in my life. The room seemed smaller suddenly, suffocating, like the walls were closing in. My chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend Rachel, to scream at them for being so blind. But nothing came out. Words failed. Me, stuck somewhere between rage and despair. Instead, I turned to Rachel, searching her face for, what? Permission, reassurance, strength? Whatever it was, she gave it to me silently, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Fine," I spat eventually, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "If that's how you feel, then fine." I grabbed Rachel's hand and pulled her toward the door, ignoring Mom's sharp intake of breath behind me. Outside, the cold autumn air hit us like a slap, shocking me back into reality. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my car keys, tears blurring my vision. I hated crying in front of Rachel. It made me feel weak, vulnerable. But I couldn't stop them this time. Not after that. We drove home in silence, the kind that feels heavy and loaded, like there's too much to say but not enough words to say it. Finally, Rachel reached over and squeezed my knee. "You okay?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with concern. No, I wasn't okay. I was angry and hurt and confused, torn between wanting to protect her and needing to fight for her. But I nodded anyway, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah," I lied. "I'm fine." Except I wasn't. Because here's the ugly truth. Their rejection of Rachel wasn't just about her. It was about me too. About who I am and who I've chosen to be. Every time they dismissed her, they dismissed me. And every time I let it slide, I betrayed myself. So why hadn't I fought harder? Why had I walked away instead of standing my ground? That question haunted me for days, gnawing at my insides like a hungry animal. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, dissecting every word, every glance, every pause. What would have happened if I'd stayed? If I'd told them exactly how wrong they were? Would it have changed anything? Or would it have made things worse? And then there was Rachel, sweet and patient and infuriatingly understanding. She never pushed me to talk about it, never pressured me to make a decision one way or another. But late at night, when she thought I was asleep, I'd catch her staring out the window, lost in thought. Was she regretting sticking by me? Wondering if loving me was worth the cost? The worst part? I didn't blame her if she was. Loving someone whose family doesn't approve isn't easy. It's exhausting, heartbreaking work. And yet, here she was, holding my hand through all of it, reminding me why I chose her in the first place. "You're stronger than you think," she whispered one night, brushing a strand of hair off my forehead. "Stronger than them. But am I? Really? Or am I just fooling myself into thinking I can fix something that's fundamentally broken? Because deep down, I know this isn't over, not by a long shot. Stick with me, because the cracks are widening, and soon they'll break wide open. It came down to this: help them rebuild or walk away for good. Sounds simple, right? Except nothing about this situation was simple anymore. Every decision felt like stepping onto thin ice, knowing full well it might crack beneath me at any second. And here's the kicker. The bakery wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of everything they stood for, everything they'd sacrificed, and yes, everything they'd taken from me too. Helping them meant forgiving those sacrifices, or at least pretending to forgive them, and that scared me more than I cared to admit. The day after Rachel and I left the bakery, I couldn't stop thinking about Mom's words. "Your girlfriend shouldn't come next time." Those 7 little syllables looped endlessly in my mind, taunting me, reminding me of how much they still refused to see. But worse than her words was Dad's silence, his inability or unwillingness to stand up to her, to defend me, to acknowledge that Rachel wasn't some outsider but the person who made my life whole. Was he complicit in their rejection? Or just too weak to challenge it? Either way, his passivity cut deep, leaving me feeling betrayed all over again. And yet, here's where the moral dilemma sank its teeth in. A neighbor stopped me outside the grocery store later that week, pulling me aside with a nervous glance around. "I heard about the fire," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "They lost everything, Claire. Everything." She hesitated, then added softly, "They're embarrassed, ashamed. That's why they act the way they do. It's not you. It's them." Her words hit me like a freight train, knocking loose memories I'd tried so hard to bury. The late nights spent frosting cakes alongside Mom, her hands guiding mine as we worked together under the warm glow of the kitchen lights. The quiet pride in Dad's eyes when he watched me master a new recipe, his gruff approval meaning more than he ever realized. These weren't just fragments of the past. They were pieces of me. Pieces I'd been forced to leave behind when I walked out of their lives 3 years ago. But if helping them rebuild meant swallowing my pride, setting aside my anger, and playing along with their rules, even temporarily, was I willing to do it? For them? For myself? Or would I be betraying Rachel by letting them dictate terms? Rachel saw the storm brewing inside me before I said a word. One evening, as we sat on the couch eating takeout straight from the cartons, she set her fork down and turned to face me. "What's going on?" she asked gently, her brow furrowed with concern. At first I shrugged it off, muttering something vague about work stress or bad weather. But she didn't buy it, not for a second. "Claire," she pressed, her tone firmer now. "Talk to me." So I did. I told her everything, the neighbor's warning, the memories flooding back, the guilt twisting itself into knots in my stomach. I even admitted what I hadn't wanted to say aloud. That part of me wanted to forgive them, not because they deserved it, but because holding on to resentment felt like carrying a boulder uphill every single day. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face, and Rachel pulled me close, holding me tight while I cried. When I finally calmed down enough to speak again, she asked the one question I'd been avoiding. "Do you think helping them will change anything? Or are you doing it for yourself?" That stopped me cold. Was I trying to fix something unfixable? To rewrite history, smooth over cracks that ran too deep to mend? Or was I clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could learn to accept me for who I am, Rachel included? And if I tried and failed, would I lose myself in the process? The truth is, I didn't know. How could I? This wasn't a math problem with a clear solution. It was messy, complicated, human. Loving Rachel had taught me how to fight for myself, how to stand firm in the face of judgment, but it had also shown me the cost of standing alone. Could I really turn my back on the people who raised me, flawed and broken though they were? Or would walking away mean giving up on any chance of reconciliation, no matter how slim? If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you risk reopening old wounds for the sake of closure, however fleeting it might be? Or would you protect your peace, knowing that sometimes love means letting go instead of holding on? Stick with me, because the hardest choice isn't between staying or leaving. It's figuring out which path honors both who I've become and where I came from. And trust me, the answer isn't easy. It was supposed to be a normal day. Just another trip to the bakery to drop off some paperwork, rent estimates, repair quotes, nothing personal. I told myself I could handle it, that I'd built walls strong enough to keep their judgment out, their disapproval at bay. But life has a way of laughing in your face when you think you're ready, doesn't it? Because what happened next wasn't just painful. It was catastrophic. I walked in, and for once they were actually working together. Mom kneading dough like her life depended on it, Dad stacking trays with quiet precision. It almost felt peaceful, surreal even. Until I noticed the envelope sitting on the counter, an official-looking one, crisp and white against the worn wood. Something about it made my stomach churn, but I ignored it, focusing instead on handing over the papers I'd brought. "Here," I said curtly, sliding them across the surface. "This should cover the basics." Mom barely glanced at them before nodding distractedly. Then she gestured toward the envelope. "That came yesterday," she said, her voice tight. "For you." My heart sank. From me? From who? My hands trembled as I picked it up, tearing it open without thinking. Inside was a letter. From Rachel's mom. The words blurred together at first, panic making it hard to focus. But then one sentence jumped out, sharp and brutal. "We know about the money, and we know why you're really helping them." The room spun. My knees buckled and I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. They knew. Somehow they knew. Rachel's family had always been supportive, kind even. But this was different. This wasn't support. It was accusation. Her mom hadn't signed off with love or concern. Instead, the final line read, "If you choose them over us, don't expect us to stand by and watch." "What is it?" Mom asked sharply, noticing my reaction. I didn't answer. Not right away. How could I? The weight of the letter crushed me, pressing down until I couldn't breathe. Here I was, caught between two families, each demanding loyalty while offering none in return. If I helped Mom and Dad, I risked losing Rachel. Not just her, but her entire family, the people who'd embraced me when mine turned their backs. And if I chose Rachel, I abandoned the bakery, the last tangible piece of my childhood, the place where memories of Mom teaching me to frost cakes still lingered like ghosts. Dad must have seen something in my expression because he stepped closer. His brow furrowed. "Claire," he said, his voice softer than usual. "What's wrong?" Wrong? Everything was wrong. Nothing was simple anymore. Every choice felt like betrayal. Every step forward came with a cost I wasn't sure I could pay. I shoved the letter back into the envelope, shoving it into my pocket like it might burn a hole through the fabric. "Nothing," I muttered, though my voice cracked halfway through. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. By the time I got home, Rachel was waiting for me, pacing the living room like a caged animal. When she saw me, she stopped dead, her eyes narrowing. "You went there again," she accused, her voice trembling with anger. Or hurt, I couldn't tell which. "After what they said to me, to us, you still went back?" "I'm trying to fix things," I snapped, defensive before I even realized it. "Don't you get that? Don't you understand how hard this is for me?" "No, Claire," she shot back, her voice rising. "What I understand is that every time you go back, you let them treat us like we don't matter. Like I don't matter." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless. She wasn't wrong. They did treat her like she didn't matter. Hell, they treated me like I didn't matter most days. But hearing her say it aloud, seeing the pain in her eyes, broke something inside me. Because she mattered more than anything. More than the bakery, more than my parents' approval, more than my own guilt. Didn't she? And yet, what about the bakery? What about the late nights spent learning recipes, the early mornings frosting cakes, the years of sweat and flour dust embedded in my skin? Was I really willing to walk away from all of that, for good this time? Or would walking away mean giving up part of myself, erasing chapters of my life like they never existed? Rachel watched me silently, tears streaming down her face now. "Tell me," she whispered hoarsely. "Tell me I'm enough. Tell me you won't leave me behind for them." Her question shattered me, cracking open wounds I thought I'd buried long ago. Of course she was enough. She was everything. But saying it aloud felt like admitting defeat, like conceding that the battle for reconciliation was lost before it even began. Could I live with that? Could I live without her? By morning, I still didn't have answers. All I knew was that the clock was ticking louder than ever, each second bringing me closer to a decision I wasn't sure I could make. The bakery needed repairs, immediate ones, or it would close permanently. Mom and Dad were drowning, their pride the only thing keeping them afloat. And Rachel deserved better than someone who couldn't commit fully, who kept one foot in the past while reaching for the future. So here's the question. If you were me, what would you do? Would you save the bakery, sacrificing the relationship you've built with the person who saved you? Or would you burn it all down, knowing that sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward? Stick with me, because the storm isn't over, it's just beginning. And trust me, the hardest part isn't choosing. It's living with the consequences. The night before the meeting, I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of what might happen. Mom's cold stare, Dad's silence, Rachel's tears. Each image felt like a shard of glass lodged in my chest, sharp and unrelenting. I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything, that no matter what I chose, someone would end up hurt. Probably everyone. Rachel tried to stay awake with me, sitting cross-legged on the bed as I paced back and forth like a caged animal. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. But I did. Didn't I? The clock was ticking louder than ever, each tick echoing in my ears like a countdown to disaster. If I didn't make a choice, soon one would be made for me, and I wasn't ready to let that happen. By sunrise, I still hadn't figured it out. All I knew was that I had two options: show up at the bakery and try one last time to fix things, or walk away, cutting ties completely. Neither felt right. Neither felt safe. Walking into that bakery again meant facing Mom's judgment, Dad's indifference, and the suffocating weight of years of resentment. But walking away meant leaving behind the only place that ever truly felt like home. And maybe, just maybe, destroying any chance I had at reconciliation, not just with them, but with myself. When I finally got there, the air smelled different. Staler, heavier, like the building itself knew something was about to break. Mom stood behind the counter, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, while Dad hovered near the door, his jaw clenched so hard I thought it might crack. They looked tired, defeated. For a moment, guilt surged through me, sharp and overwhelming. Was this really how far we'd fallen? Was this what 3 years of silence had done to us? "Are you going to help or not?" Mom asked abruptly, her tone clipped and impatient. Just like that, the fragile calm shattered. No pleasantries, no small talk, just straight to the point, like always. Except this time, her words hit harder than usual, landing somewhere deep inside me where all my doubts lived. Help them? Or help myself? Could I even do both anymore? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I didn't trust myself to say it without crying. Instead, I pulled the letter from my pocket, the one from Rachel's mom, and slid it across the counter. "Read it," I said hoarsely, my voice barely above a whisper. "Then tell me what I'm supposed to do." Mom picked it up hesitantly, her brow furrowing as she scanned the page. When she finished, she handed it to Dad without a word. He read it quickly, his expression unreadable, then set it down with a heavy sigh. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched out endlessly, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Finally, Mom looked up, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like forever. "Is this true?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "Do they really think—" "They're scared," I interrupted, my own voice cracking under the strain. "Just like I'm scared. Just like you're scared." Saying it aloud felt dangerous, like admitting weakness in front of an enemy. But weren't we all enemies? Here. Weren't we all fighting for scraps of love and forgiveness that never seemed to be enough? Dad shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat before speaking. "We didn't mean—" he started, then trailed off, shaking his head. "We didn't mean to push you away." Didn't mean to? Those 4 words echoed in my mind, bouncing off walls I'd built to protect myself. Didn't mean to? Then why did it feel like they had? Why did it feel like every decision they'd made, every word they'd said, or hadn't said, had been designed to cut me loose? Before I could respond, the bell above the door jingled sharply, startling all of us. Rachel stepped inside, her face pale but determined. She glanced at me, then at them, her gaze steady despite the storm brewing in her eyes. I told you not to come alone, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Rachel, I began, but she held up a hand, silencing me. No, she said, stepping closer. If this is really happening, if you're really choosing them over me, I deserve to hear it from you. Right now. Her words landed like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless. Choosing them over her? Is that what I was doing? Was that who I'd become? The question hung in the air, unanswered, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to face. Because if I walked away from her now, wasn't I proving her mom right? Proving that I valued their approval more than her love? And if I stayed with her, wasn't I abandoning the people who raised me, flawed and broken though they were? Here's the thing. Life doesn't give you easy answers. It forces you into corners, makes you choose between impossible options. So here's my question to you. If you were standing where I am right now, torn between loyalty and love, obligation and freedom, what would you do? Would you fight for the past, or would you run toward the future? Stick with me, because the next chapter will blow your mind, and trust me, you won't see the twist coming. Follow along to find out how far forgiveness can go when pushed to its limits. This isn't just my story, it's yours too. The room felt smaller suddenly, suffocating, like the walls were closing in on us. Rachel stood there, her presence both a comfort and a complication, while Mom and Dad exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to handle this unexpected intrusion. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. It was as if time itself had frozen, holding its breath along with me. But then Rachel took another step forward, her voice steady despite the tremor I could see in her hands. I'm not leaving, she said firmly, locking eyes with my mom. Not unless Claire asks me to. Mom stiffened, her arms tightening across her chest like armor. This isn't about you, she snapped, though her voice lacked conviction. It sounded hollow, defensive, like she was trying too hard to convince herself more than anyone else. And maybe she was, because deep down, we all knew it was about Rachel. Everything always came back to her, to us, and the fact that they couldn't accept who I loved without accepting who I am. Rachel didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to face them fully, standing tall even though I could tell she wanted to shrink into herself. Actually, she countered, her tone calm but unyielding, it's completely about me, because if you can't respect me, you don't respect her. And if you don't respect her, she paused, glancing at me briefly before finishing quietly, then none of this matters anyway. Her words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable, cutting through years of avoidance and denial. They weren't just talking points. They were truths, raw and painful, laid bare for everyone to see. I watched Mom's face crumple slightly, guilt flickering in her eyes before she masked it with anger. How dare you, she started, but Dad interrupted her, his voice low and gravelly. Enough, he barked, stepping between them like he was breaking up a fight. His gaze darted between Rachel and me, conflicted, uncertain. Then he looked at Mom, his expression softening ever so slightly. She's right, he admitted reluctantly, his words barely audible over the tension crackling in the room. We've made mistakes. Too many. Mistakes? That word again. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough. But hearing him say it aloud felt monumental somehow, like a dam finally cracking open. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously, refusing to let myself break down now. Not when everything was still so fragile, so unresolved. Mom opened, her mouth to argue, but no sound came out. Instead, she sank onto one of the stools behind the counter, her shoulders slumping under the weight of something I couldn't name. Regret? Shame? Fear? Whatever it was, it rendered her silent, leaving only the faint hum of the refrigerator to fill the void. And then it hit me. The realization that this wasn't just their moment of reckoning. It was mine too. All these years, I'd been waiting for them to apologize, to validate my pain, to admit they were wrong. But what about me? Hadn't I spent those same years carrying resentment like a shield, letting it define me instead of moving past it? What kind of life had I built on bitterness alone? I didn't come here to fight, I said finally, my voice shaking but clear. I came here because I wanted answers, because I thought helping you might fix things. I gestured vaguely, at the bakery around us, at the cracked walls and faded countertops. But none of this will ever be fixed. Not really, if we keep pretending the problem is money instead of us. Mom flinched visibly, her lips parting as if she wanted to protest but couldn't find the words. Dad shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the floor. Even Rachel seemed taken aback, her hand reaching instinctively for mine as if to steady me. But I didn't need steadying anymore. Not from her. Not from anyone. This was my fight now. My truth to share. You disowned me, I continued, my voice rising slightly as the dam inside me finally broke. You erased me from your lives because I chose to love someone who makes me happy. Someone who sees me for who I am and loves me anyway. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To lose your family. Not because of anything you did, but because of who you are. Tears spilled down my cheeks now, hot and relentless. But I didn't try to stop them. Let them see me cry. Let them see the damage they'd caused. Maybe then, they'd understand why forgiveness felt impossible, why trust felt like a distant dream rather than a reality. For a long moment, silence reigned again, heavy and suffocating. Then Mom whispered, almost too softly to hear, "We're sorry." Just 2 words, but they carried the weight of an entire lifetime. Sorry for what? For rejecting me? For refusing to accept Rachel? For letting pride stand in the way of love? Probably all of it. And none of it. Apologies were never enough to undo the past, but maybe they were a start. Dad nodded slowly, his jaw clenched tight. We messed up, he admitted gruffly, his voice thick with emotion. Big time. And we don't deserve your forgiveness. But if you're willing to give us another chance. He trailed off, unable to finish, but the unspoken question lingered in the air. Would I? Could I forgive them after everything? Or would doing so mean betraying myself and Rachel all over again? Here's the hardest part. Forgiveness isn't linear. It doesn't happen in one dramatic moment or one heartfelt apology. It's messy, complicated, human. And sometimes it means choosing to move forward even when the road ahead feels uncertain. So here's my question to you. If you were me, staring down decades of hurt and longing for connection, would you take that leap of faith? Would you risk opening yourself up to more pain for the slimmest chance at healing? Stick with me, because the next chapter will reveal whether forgiveness is truly possible, or if some wounds run too deep to mend. This story isn't over yet. Just as I thought I'd said everything there was to say, just as I braced myself for whatever came next, acceptance or rejection, forgiveness or final goodbyes, the bell above the door jingled again. We all turned toward it instinctively, startled by the interruption. And then my breath caught in my throat, because standing there, framed by the doorway like some ghost from the past, was Grandma Ruth. She hadn't been part of our lives. Not really. Not since before the fallout. She lived on the outskirts of Maplewood, quiet and reclusive, content to let Mom and Dad handle family business, while she kept her distance. But now here she was, leaning heavily on her cane, her sharp eyes scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and authority that made my stomach twist. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice raspy but commanding, cutting through the tension like a knife. Nobody answered right away. We were too stunned, too unsure how to explain the emotional minefield we'd been navigating. Finally, Mom stammered, "Mom, What are you doing here?" Grandma ignored her, hobbling further into the bakery until she reached the counter. Then she set her cane aside with a thud and fixed each of us with a piercing gaze. "I heard shouting," she said simply, as if that explained everything. Her attention landed on me last, lingering longer than necessary. "You look like you're about to fall apart, Claire." Her words hit me harder than I expected, raw and unfiltered, stripping away whatever composure I'd managed to hold on to. Before I could respond, she turned to Mom and Dad, her expression hardening. "You two should be ashamed of yourselves," she snapped, pointing a bony finger at them. "All this nonsense over who your daughter loves, over pride and stubbornness. You've forgotten what family means." The accusation hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Mom opened her mouth to protest, but Grandma cut her off with a wave of her hand. "Don't bother," she said sharply. "I know exactly what you've done, and so does everyone else in this town. Do you think people don't talk? Do you think they don't see how miserable you've made yourselves, and her?" Her words sent a ripple through the room, forcing us all to confront the ugliness we'd tried so hard to ignore. But Grandma wasn't done yet. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled something out of her coat pocket, a folded piece of paper, and slid it across the counter toward me. "This is yours," she said firmly. My hands trembled as I picked it up, unfolding it carefully. It was a deed to the bakery. What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's always been yours," Grandma replied, her tone softening slightly. "Your grandfather left it to you when he passed. Not them," she added, nodding toward Mom and Dad. "You." The revelation hit me like a freight train, knocking the wind out of me and leaving my mind scrambling to catch up. The bakery, the one place that had defined my childhood, the symbol of everything I'd lost. It wasn't theirs to control. It never had been. And now, suddenly, it was mine. Mom gasped audibly, her face pale with shock. "Mom, how could you? How could I?" Grandma shot back, her voice rising. "How could you? You've treated this girl like she's disposable, like her happiness doesn't matter. Well, guess what? This bakery belongs to her now, and if she wants to burn it to the ground, that's her choice." Her declaration left the room spinning, every head turning toward me as if waiting for instructions. Burn it down? Could I do that? Should I? The thought alone felt terrifying and liberating all at once. If I walked away now, I could leave everything behind. The memories, the pain, the expectations. Or I could stay, rebuild, rewrite the story, on my own terms. Here's the question. What would you do if the thing you loved most became yours to destroy or save? Stick with me, because this twist changes everything. And trust me, the next chapter will leave you breathless. Keep following along for stories that challenge, surprise, and remind you why redemption is worth fighting for. I stood there, holding the deed in my hands, the weight of it both literal and symbolic. The bakery wasn't just a building anymore. It was a choice. My choice. For so long, I'd let other people decide who I was and what I deserved. Mom and Dad with their silent disapproval. Rachel's mom with her ultimatums. Even Grandma Ruth stepping in like some deus ex machina to flip everything on its head. But now, for the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own life. Rachel's hand found mine, squeezing gently as if to remind me she was still there, still with me no matter what I decided. Her presence steadied me, grounding me when all I wanted to do was run, or scream, or cry, until there were no tears left. Instead, I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. This wasn't about them, not really. It was about me, about finding a way forward that honored who I'd become instead of clinging to who I used to be. The room stayed eerily quiet, everyone watching me like I was about to deliver some kind of verdict. Mom looked shell-shocked, her arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was trying to hold something together inside. Dad stared at the floor. His jaw clenched so hard I thought it might crack. Even Grandma Ruth seemed unusually subdued, leaning against her cane as though waiting for permission to speak again. But none of that mattered. Not right now. All that mattered was the voice in my head telling me I didn't have to choose between forgiveness and freedom. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to have both. "I'm not burning it down," I said finally, my voice firm despite the storm raging inside me, "but I'm not handing it back either." Mom flinched visibly, but I pressed on before she could interrupt. "This place, this bakery, it's part of me, but it doesn't define me. Not anymore." I turned to face them fully, my gaze steady, even though my heart raced like a runaway train. You can't fix years of hurt with one apology or one gesture, and you can't expect me to forget everything that's happened because suddenly it's convenient for you. I glanced at Grandma briefly, then back at Mom and Dad. But here's the thing. I don't want to hate you. Hate is exhausting. It eats away at you until there's nothing left. So if we're going to move forward, if I'm going to move forward, you need to understand something. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. And neither is this family. Mom opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, silencing her. That means accepting Rachel, not tolerating her, not pretending she doesn't exist, but truly accepting her as part of my life. Because without her, I wouldn't have survived this. Without her, I wouldn't be standing here right now. Dad shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flickering toward Rachel for the first time. He didn't say anything, but the slight nod he gave, a barely perceptible movement, felt monumental somehow, like he was acknowledging her existence for the first time. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And as for the bakery, I continued, glancing around the worn counters and faded walls, memories flooding back in waves. It's not about fixing what's broken. It's about building something new, something better. I looked at Rachel, smiling faintly despite the lump in my throat. Maybe we turn it into a community space, a place where people can gather, share stories, feel welcome no matter who they are or who they love. Rachel's eyes lit up at the idea, her grip on my hand tightening slightly. "I like that," she murmured, her voice soft but full of hope. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence stretched out, heavy but not oppressive, like the calm after a storm. Then Grandma Ruth cleared her throat, breaking the spell. "Well," she said gruffly, though her lips twitched upward in what might have been a smile. "Looks like you've got your work cut out for you." She was right, of course. Rebuilding wouldn't be easy. Not emotionally, not practically. There would still be arguments, misunderstandings, moments when forgiveness felt impossible. But for the first time, I believed it was possible anyway. Not because they deserved it, but because I did. Because carrying anger around felt like dragging chains through quicksand, and I was done letting it weigh me down. Here's the truth. Personal growth isn't linear. It's messy, complicated, imperfect. Sometimes it feels like taking 2 steps forward only to stumble backward again. But every step counts, even the painful ones. Every moment of vulnerability, every hard-fought conversation, every tear shed in frustration or relief, it all adds up to something bigger than you realize. So here's my question to you. When was the last time you chose forgiveness over resentment, hope over fear, love over judgment? How did it change you? Did it make you stronger or softer, smarter or braver? Stick with me, because this story isn't just about me. It's about all of us learning how to heal, grow, and transform in ways we never thought possible. Comment below with your thoughts. Let's keep the conversation going. The next morning, I woke up early, not because I had to, but because I couldn't sleep. My mind buzzed with plans, possibilities, fears, and hopes, all tangled together like a ball of yarn that refused to unravel neatly. Outside, the sun was just beginning to rise over Maplewood, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. It felt fitting somehow, a new day dawning, full of promise despite the chaos left behind by the night before. Rachel stirred beside me, her arm draped loosely across my waist. She opened one eye groggily, then smiled when she saw me staring out the window. "You okay?" she murmured, her voice still thick with sleep. I nodded, though the question didn't feel simple enough for a yes or no answer. Was I okay? Maybe not completely, but I was closer than I'd been in years. The weight that had been crushing my chest for so long finally felt lighter, like someone had cracked open a door I didn't realize was locked. Forgiveness wasn't easy. It never would be. But choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past gave me room to breathe again. And that made all the difference. We got dressed quietly, neither of us saying much. There was no need. The silence between us was comfortable now, filled with unspoken understanding rather than tension. When we arrived at the bakery, tools and supplies were already piled outside, courtesy of Grandma Ruth, who apparently hadn't wasted any time getting things rolling. She stood near the entrance, overseeing everything with the kind of authority only she could pull off, even while leaning heavily on her cane. "Don't just stand there gawking," she barked when she saw us approach. "Get to work." Her bluntness made me laugh, something I hadn't done in what felt like forever. As Rachel and I started unpacking boxes and sorting through materials, I noticed Mom hovering uncertainly near the doorway. She looked smaller somehow, frailer, like the armor she'd worn for so long had finally fallen away. Dad lingered nearby, too, his hands shoved deep into his pockets as if he didn't know what else to do with them. Neither of them said anything at first, but their presence alone spoke volumes. By mid-morning, the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and sawdust, mingling with the lingering scent of cinnamon from decades past. It was strange, almost surreal, seeing the bakery transform piece by piece. The old sign came down, replaced, with a temporary banner reading New Beginnings Bakery in bold letters. Someone, we never figured out who, had scrawled a rainbow-colored heart in the corner, a quiet nod to the changes happening inside as well as out. As the hours passed, people began showing up, neighbors, friends, former customers, all volunteering, to help without being asked. Mrs. Hargrove brought coffee and donuts. Mr. Peterson hauled in lumber for repairs. Even kids from the neighborhood pitched in, sweeping floors and carrying tools like they were part of some secret mission. Watching them work side by side, laughing and talking like none of this was unusual, reminded me why I loved Maplewood despite everything. These people weren't perfect. They gossiped, judged, held grudges. But they also cared, deeply, messily, humanly. At one point, Mom approached me hesitantly, holding a tray of cookies she'd baked earlier. I thought, maybe, she stammered, her voice trailing off awkwardly. Then she set the tray down and stepped back, wringing her hands nervously. "I'm sorry, Claire," she whispered, so softly I almost missed it. "For everything." Her apology landed somewhere deep inside me, stirring emotions I wasn't ready to untangle yet. But I nodded anyway, accepting it. Not because I believed she was fully ready to change, but because I wanted to believe she could. That was enough, for now. Dad joined us later, handing me a hammer like it was some kind of peace offering. "Need an extra pair of hands?" he asked gruffly, avoiding eye contact. I took the tool wordlessly, letting the gesture speak for itself. Progress wasn't going to happen overnight, but this small act of participation, felt monumental. By sunset, the bakery looked different. Not finished exactly, but alive in a way it hadn't been in years. Fresh coats of paint brightened the walls, new shelves lined the counters, and strings of fairy lights twinkled above the registers like constellations. Rachel stood beside me, admiring our handiwork with quiet pride. "It's beautiful," she said softly, leaning into me. "Just like you." Her words caught me off guard, bringing tears to my eyes unexpectedly. Beautiful? Me? After everything I'd been through, the anger, the guilt, the fear. I wasn't sure I deserved that label, but maybe beauty isn't about perfection. Maybe it's about resilience, about finding light in the cracks and choosing to keep moving forward anyway. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the bakery was finally quiet, I sat alone at one of the tables, tracing patterns on its newly sanded surface. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped here. Instead, I felt hopeful. Like this place wasn't just a reminder of what I'd lost, but a foundation for what I could build. Here's the thing about endings. They're rarely tidy. Life doesn't wrap itself up in neat little bows or tie loose ends with satisfying clicks. Sometimes, resolution means learning to live with uncertainty, trusting that growth will come even when you can't see it yet. So here's my takeaway. And yours too, if you'll let it be. Healing takes courage. Forgiveness takes practice. Love takes patience. And transformation? Transformation takes everything you've got, but it gives back more than you ever thought possible. Stick with me, because this journey is far from over. What happens next might surprise you, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. The days following the bakery's transformation felt surreal, like stepping into a dream where everything looked familiar, but nothing was quite the same. Mom started showing up more often, not just to bake or clean, but to talk. Real talk, not the clipped surface-level conversations we'd been having for years. One afternoon, she sat across from me at the counter, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "Being better." Her honesty caught me off guard. For so long, I'd expected her to have all the answers, to be the strong, unshakable force she'd always pretended to be. But sitting there, watching her struggle to find the right words, I realized something important. She wasn't perfect. None of us were. And maybe that was okay. "I don't either," I replied honestly, giving her a small smile. "But I think we'll figure it out. Together." It wasn't an easy process. Far from it. There were still moments when old habits resurfaced, when judgment slipped through the cracks of good intentions. Once, she mentioned Rachel in passing, calling her your friend instead of using her name. The slip stung, even though I knew it wasn't malicious. When I called her out on it later, she flinched visibly, then nodded. "You're right," she said softly. "I'm sorry." Apologies came easier now, though they still carried weight. Dad, meanwhile, took a different approach. He didn't say much, never had, but he showed up every day, working alongside me and Rachel as if trying to prove himself without words. At first, his presence felt awkward, forced, like he didn't know how to bridge the gap between us. Then one evening, as we were closing up, he handed me a photo he'd salvaged from the fire. It was faded and singed at the edges, but I recognized it instantly. The three of us standing in front of the bakery on opening day, grinning like nothing could ever go wrong. "I thought you might want this," he said gruffly, avoiding my gaze. His tone was casual, almost dismissive, but the gesture spoke volumes. For the first time in years, I saw him not as the man who turned his back on me, but as someone who, like me, was learning how to move forward. Rachel noticed the changes too, though she didn't push them. Instead, she gave everyone space to grow while staying firmly by my side, reminding me why I fell in love with her in the first place. Her patience was endless, her support unwavering, even when I stumbled, even when I doubted myself. Late one night, after a particularly tough conversation with Mom, she held me close and whispered, "You're stronger than you think. Stronger than all of us." Her faith in me became a lifeline, pulling me through moments when forgiveness felt impossible. Because forgiving wasn't just about them. It was about me. About letting go of the anger that had kept me tethered to the past, freeing myself to build something new, something better. Even Grandma Ruth surprised me. She stopped by regularly now, bringing homemade pies or offering unsolicited advice. Don't let them walk all over you again. But beneath her tough exterior, I saw glimpses of vulnerability, moments when she softened, admitting she hadn't always known what was best for our family. "We're all just doing the best we can," she said once, almost reluctantly. Even when it's not enough. As weeks turned into months, the bakery became more than just a business. It became a symbol of hope, resilience, and second chances. Neighbors gathered there daily, sharing stories and laughter over cups of coffee and slices of pie. Kids played tag between the tables, while parents swapped recipes and life lessons. Even Mrs. Hargrove joined in, hosting weekly book clubs and knitting circles that drew crowds from across town. For me, the biggest change was internal. I no longer felt torn between loyalty and love, obligation and freedom. Those battles weren't gone entirely. They never would be. But they no longer defined me. Instead, I focused on building bridges, creating connections, proving to myself that healing was possible even after years of hurt. Here's what I learned, and what I hope you take away. Growth doesn't happen overnight. It's messy, painful, imperfect. But it's also beautiful in its own way. A testament to the strength it takes to face your fears, confront your flaws, and choose love anyway. So here's my question to you. What are you willing to fight for? Who are you willing to forgive? And most importantly, how will you rebuild what matters most? Stick with me, because this story isn't just mine, it's yours too. Keep listening, keep engaging, and let's discover together how far courage and compassion can take us. Looking back now, I can see how much this journey has changed me, and not just in obvious ways. It's the little things that stick with me most. The way Mom hesitates before speaking, like she's choosing her words more carefully. The quiet pride in Dad's eyes when he sees customers laughing at the bakery tables. The ease with which Rachel and I talk about the future, instead of dwelling on the past. These moments feel monumental, because they didn't exist before. At least not like this. They're proof that growth is possible, even after years of hurt, even when it feels impossible to imagine anything different. One lesson I keep coming back to is this. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about making space for something new, something better, to take root. For so long, I thought forgiving Mom and Dad meant letting them off the hook, erasing their mistakes as if they never happened. But that's not true. Forgiveness means acknowledging the pain, sitting with it, and deciding it doesn't get to control your life anymore. Does it erase the scars? No, but it lets you carry them differently, like badges of survival instead of weights dragging you down. Another truth I've learned is that love isn't a zero-sum game. You don't have to choose between loving one person and loving another, even when those loves seem fundamentally opposed. At first, I felt like I had to pick sides, my parents or Rachel, my past or my present. But life doesn't work like that. Love expands, it grows, stretches, adapts. And sometimes, it teaches you how to hold two seemingly contradictory truths at once. I love you, and I won't compromise who I am for you. That duality saved me. It reminded me that boundaries aren't barriers, they're bridges. built with care and respect, allowing relationships to thrive without suffocating each other. Then there's the lesson about home. Growing up, I thought home was a place, a building, a street, a town. But now I realize home is people. It's the ones who stay when staying is hard, who show up even when they don't know what to say. Home is Rachel holding my hand during the hardest conversations, Grandma Ruth showing up unannounced with pie, neighbors turning the bakery into a community hub where everyone belongs. Home isn't perfect. It's messy, loud, unpredictable, but it's alive. And maybe that's the point. This story has taught me something else too, something universal. We all carry wounds from our families, whether big or small, visible or hidden. Some of us inherit guilt, others shame, still others silence. But none of us are alone in carrying those burdens, and none of us have to face them alone either. Healing isn't linear. It's messy, non-linear, full of setbacks and breakthroughs. But every step forward counts, no matter how small. Every conversation, every apology, every act of kindness adds up to something bigger than we realize. Real life mirrors this in so many ways. Think about it. How often do we let pride stand in the way of connection? How many times have we pushed people away because it felt easier than facing conflict? How many chances at reconciliation have slipped through our fingers because we were too scared to reach out? I know I've done all of these things, and probably will again. But here's the thing. It's never too late to try. Even when the odds feel stacked against you, even when failure seems inevitable, trying matters. Showing up matters. Choosing hope over fear matters. So here's my question to you, and I mean this sincerely. What's your story? Have you ever faced a moment where forgiveness felt impossible but necessary? Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship or yourself from the ground up? How did you find the strength to keep going when everything inside you wanted to give up? Share your experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Because stories like yours remind us that we're not alone, that transformation is possible, and that love, in all its messy glory, is worth fighting for. Stick with me, because this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. There's still so much to explore, so many lessons to uncover. Together, let's keep learning, growing, and finding beauty in the cracks.